Hello. This weekend, London plays host to one of its largest annual events. Hundreds of thousands of people are expected to take part in and watch the Pride in London march. But more than half a century after homosexuality was decriminalised, why do organisers and supporters think there's still a need for it? Well, I'm joined in the ITV News studio by Amrou Al-Kadhi, a writer, performer and filmmaker, Libby Baxter-Williams from Biscuit, a support group for bisexual women, and Rhammel Afflick, the Deputy Director of Communications at Pride in London. And joining us on Skype is veteran campaigner Peter Tatchell. But it's not just about what they think, we want to hear from you too. We're streaming this debate live on Facebook and YouTube, so feel free to join in. Amrou, if I can turn to you first of all, you presumably are a fan of Pride, a 100% unadulterated fan?
I'm presumably a fan of Pride. I'm not really a fan of Pride. I mean, I understand it's a great privilege to be able to not be a fan of Pride because we're safely here in the West and we can have the debate over its pros and cons. In theory, I am a fan of Pride. What Pride is slowly becoming is what I'm less of a fan of.
Which is?
Well, many things. Firstly, I'm slightly worried about the kind of corporate takeover of Pride and how a lot of brands who have previously not shown good allyship with LGBTQI people are currently cashing in on sort of the pink pound. For instance, like Topshop has got a huge, rainbow flag on its stores, but was also pretty transphobic to Travis Alabanza, who's a trans...
Well, we haven't got Topshop here to be able to answer that. Can I just pause you for a second, because we want to hear from Peter, who's done many Pride events over the years, and unfortunately, actually, we can't go to Peter. Slight technical problem there. Rhammel, you heard what Amrou had to say. You know, a bit too corporate these days?
I think it's something that Pride in London are aware of. So we have had, we've had a number of comments about the place that corporates play within Pride in London. I think it's really important to note that Pride in London are actively seeking to be very conscious of the kinds of brands that we get involved in the parade and anything else we do, and so we don't willingly take money from any organisation. And actually, there's a process in which we say, actually, what is it that your brand is doing all year round for LGBT people, and what is it you can contribute to your LGBT staff?
Rhammel, can I just stop you a second?
Yes.
Our technical issue that we had a moment ago means has been resolved. It means we can now talk to Peter.
Oh wow! Well, let's get
Oh,
Peter
wow, there he is.
Peter's joining us here over our shoulders. Peter, you've, as I said, a veteran of many Pride events. What are your thoughts on it?
Well, of course, Pride began as a celebration, but also a protest. I think it's great that Pride can be a party, but I think it's also really important to remember the ongoing battle for LGBT+ human rights. Right now, there are three big issues that affect our community. Religious organisations have exemptions from the equality laws. They're allowed legally to discriminate against LGBT people. The government is not willing yet to compensate gay and bisexual men who were convicted unjustly under historic anti-gay laws. And still we have a big problem with the detention and deportation of LGBT refugees who fled persecution in violently homophobic countries. So although we've made huge positive gains, there is still more work to do. So Pride should be a party, celebration, but also a protest too.
Pride isn't perhaps militant enough for you. Still, isn't it better to have it than not?
Oh, of course, but there's no conflict. Way back in 1972, when I helped organise the first ever UK Pride Parade, it was a carnival atmosphere. It was a great, happy, joyful occasion. But we combined that with the claim for equal human rights. So I don't see them as being mutually exclusive.
Peter, will you be there on Saturday?
I will be there on Saturday. I've been in every single London LGBT Pride March since 1972. I think this is my 47th year, and I will be there marching proudly with the Peter Tatchell Foundation and many thousands of others. To make the point, I'll be highlighting the ongoing persecution of LGBT people in Russia and Chechnya. I think it's really important that we keep those issues in the public mind and don't forget the suffering and persecution that many LGBT people face in many countries around the world.
Peter, I know you're very busy this evening. You've got a lot of events to attend, but we're very grateful for you taking time out to speak to us briefly. Thank you very, very much for joining us this evening. Can I turn to you about the role of your organisation? For the first time, I believe, that Biscuit has got a bisexual representation in the Pride Parade. Why has it taken so long?
Oh gosh, there are lots of reasons. We have had small walking groups before. There's never been a float before. And the reasons for that are complicated. You know, there's a lot of it to do with money. Our community lives below the poverty line in most cases.
Why is that?
You'd need 4 hours and a PhD to go into that.
Hours.
Yeah, there's a lot of biphobia around, and a lot of it comes from within the LGBT community, and that means it's very hard to live openly as a bi person. In big cities, it's easier, you know. In the UK, it's easier than other places, but largely the number of bi people who are out is minuscule in comparison to gay men and to lesbians.
Rhammel, do you accept that Pride has been slow in embracing the needs of the bi community?
I don't think it's correct to say it's been slow in embracing it. I think, for example, I think what is important now more than ever is that we ensure that certain intersections of our community are highlighted. And it's one of the reasons I got involved in Pride in London myself, is because I actually felt that the representation of people of colour and bi people within our community wasn't prominent enough. And it wasn't necessarily specifically about Pride in London, but more broadly, I think actually a lot needs to be done to ensure that we not only challenge what's happening in the wider UK community, but we also challenge what's happening in our own community. And I think that's really imperative moving forward, and it's something that Pride in London have been focused on throughout the lead up to this year's Pride in London. And I think it's important actually we recognise that some of our community are facing an even more difficult time, and we've really tried to create a place for that at this year's Pride.
Back in the 70s, when well, it's now 46 years, isn't it, since the first gay Pride? Well, back in the 70s, as we heard from Peter, as you alluded to, Amrou, it was very much more of a protest than a party. I mean, do you wish that you'd been around in those days?
Well, I mean, in terms of that, I mean, I do get worried a lot by the rhetoric I see in a lot of straight media of now Pride's a celebration because the fight is over and it's all great. And I think that's a really dangerous phrase, and that's why I sometimes worry about the lightness of Pride. And I know you are doing a lot, but in terms of how kind of happy and positive, and Nando's has a sticker and look how great this all is, I think it slightly puts a smoke screen on the fact that it's still maybe not legislatively difficult, but on a daily level, like we saw yesterday, the government released statistics, 2/3 of gay people just don't hold hands in the public. But also, you know, for instance, within the gay community, like you were saying, like Islamophobia is quite prominent, right? I was speaking to Iman, who are an LGBT charity for Muslims, and last year at Pride, because they didn't have enough money, they were right at the back of the Pride, where obviously a lot of the corporations got to be at the front. They experienced Islamophobia. They had a really terrible time, and I think that was because
At Pride?
At Pride, yeah, at Pride. And I think
Quite extraordinary, isn't it?
Well,
have you heard of that, Rhammel?
I think for me, it's really important that we highlight some of the issues that our community is facing. And I think there are certain communities, people of colour, certainly Muslims within our community, who are experiencing things that they shouldn't have to experience. And that's one of the things that one of the messages I've been taking out there, that actually it's quite easy to challenge homophobia and the things that you know, you're passionate about, but also how can you challenge yourself and address some of the things that you're doing that might be problematic. And it's some of the things that actually we've been doing Pride in London Live, which has been our opportunity to get community groups to speak out about some of these issues. And it's been very obvious that actually a lot of people do think some of these issues have been dealt with, and you know, even homophobia. Some people think, you know, the fight is over, when actually I think it's important to remind people a lot is still at stake, and there is still a significant amount of issues both within wider society and within our community that we have to tackle head on.
Right, and I mean, but just to add on to that, you know, like, yes, it's legal to get married now, but that doesn't really affect most queer people on a daily basis. Like, the mental health statistics at the moment are so worrying. And I think Pride and other big stages like this, you know, I would love to see more of a discussion on the NHS,
Absolutely.
actually. Like, and those kind of things need to intersect.
But it is better, isn't it, that it's a mainstream event these days rather than niche?
No, I mean, it is a mainstream event, but it's a mainstream event that hides a lot. So you do get people who go along and just have a party. And if that's what you want to see, that's what you will see. But there are people there who are there at great personal expense, both emotionally and monetarily, and for whom it's very difficult, and they're doing it because of how important it is to them. And those people do struggle, and those communities do struggle, and they do need that visibility and that protest.
One thing I said at the beginning is that we want to hear from people who are following us online this evening. So let's have a look at some of the comments that have been coming in on Facebook. This is, I'd love to hear what you have to say to this. Julie Cunningham says, let's also have a single parent parade, a dog lover parade, cat people parade. We are human too, we also matter and don't get any of this attention. Lindsay Louise Turner says, Pride isn't a protest, it's a celebration of acceptance.
Okay, yeah.
Which you presumably endorse?
Yeah. I think to come back on the comment, I think one of the things I find very interesting about that rhetoric, this whole idea of, oh, should there be a straight pride? And my thing is, actually, if you're passionate enough about that, then create your own space for the issues that you are passionate about, and don't use a space that's been carved out to speak out about actually issues that don't normally get the airtime. You know, we're here in the studio today to talk about LGBT issues because actually it's recognised that in the mainstream media that sometimes those issues don't get airtime because it's not part of those mainstream narratives. So my argument in response to anyone who does want to create their own pride for whatever their issue is that I'd encourage you to do so and not to use a space that LGBT people have carved out to talk about these issues.
Also, to the first comment, having a cat does not lead to a systemic system where you know, don't make as much money as everyone else, have decreased mental health. You know, the reason there is a gay pride is because there is a structure in society which means that LGBTQI people need more spaces. Someone who has a dog is not persecuted because of it. That is the difference.
You've never paid vet bills.
This is why, you know, when people talk to me about racism to white people, I literally want to, like, get into a coma because white people do not walk on the street every second of every day worried that they're going to have a racist attack. People of colour too. That's why there should be pride for people of colour.
Okay,
anyway,
let's
Julie.
move on to broader society, because ahead of this year's Pride Parade, the Prime Minister gave us her thoughts on LGBT plus rights.
I want to be seen as an ally of the LGBT community here in the UK. I think that what we're doing in government shows that we are recognising that there are some very real issues that people here feel, members, you know, people, whether they're a member of lesbian, gay, bi or trans people, however people identify. We want a country where people are able to be open about who they are, who they love, how they identify. And we want to see an end to practices like conversion therapy, which is an abhorrent practice.
Amrou, are you reassured by what you hear from the Prime Minister?
I'm never reassured about anything that Theresa May says. But in terms of that, I mean, that's quite an empty statement considering the way that she's voted on a lot of gay policies. And also, she's not very popular at the moment, so I always just have that paranoia that she's cashing in on the Pride moment and just wants to have some kind of popularity. So I'm not comforted, but I never am with her.
Libby, you suggested that bisexuals were the overlooked consonant in LGBT as far as Pride was concerned. What are the common misconceptions about bisexuals?
Oh God, where to begin? We're all promiscuous. We've all got split personalities. We'll cheat on you. We're all sex workers. We're all women, and none of us actually exist.
And the reality is?
Well, none of those things are true. Yes, we've got people with mental...
Tell us about your background.
My background, I'm a northern woman. I've been out as bi most of my life. Sometimes it's been easy, sometimes it has been difficult.
Is it more difficult with the people around you or more difficult when it comes to relationships?
It's not difficult when it comes to relationships at all. I can't imagine why it would be. my relationships are one-on-one, and they're just like everyone else's, and but there isn't like a secret handshake.
I think to add to that, I think one of the things that I find frustrating, you know, about people finding out you're bi is this whole idea that, you know, me having to justify my own experiences and justify, you know, why I feel this way. And I think actually, you know, you don't ask anyone else to justify it in that same way. So why should anyone else have to?
Yeah, no.
And I think quite often it's not only what's happening outside of the community. It can also be inside the community. You know, people you know have these odd jokes that they want to make. And I sort of think, why have we not moved forward from that? Why are we still having to justify our...
How aware were you of Pride when you were growing up?
I wasn't aware at all. I wasn't aware at all, and actually I think it certainly, had I been aware of Pride, I think I definitely would have expressed my sexuality in a different way and been a lot more confident about my sexuality. And that's one of the reasons why I'm involved in Pride, because I think actually, you know, for me, it's also about those young people who are growing up in more rural places in the UK and don't necessarily have those figures or those people in their lives that actually they can kind of relate to in some way. And look up to maybe as well.
Were you aware of Pride when you were younger?
Well, I was raised, I mean, in the Middle East until I was 12. And so I wasn't even aware of the word gay, though I was fantasizing about Robin Hood the Fox. And actually, apparently a lot of gay kids were. When I talk to them, it's always Robin Hood the Fox.
Oh, wow.
But my first experience of Pride was I was 15. I was walking with my parents in Oxford Street. You know, we're conservative Muslims, and I just... you know, saw from my peripheral vision people who were out and saying that they were gay in public. And it was an amazingly significant moment in my life because it was a sort of periphery of hope. And look, there are people out there walking, saying they're gay, people are clapping for them. And whilst I was, you know, with my parents and I was dealing with all that kind of stuff, I just knew that there was a window. So I can be very critical of Pride now, but I can also kind of chime in with what you're saying is even just seeing it, like, people saying, I'm queer, I'm happy about it.
What did your conservative Muslim parents make of it?
It's been a very long... Pride, I mean, not much. I mean, they're much better now, actually. It's just been
too?
What do you mean?
Much better with you?
Yeah, it's been a long... you know, that's a separate conversation.
Well, let's pause for a moment and have a look at some of the comments that are being made. And Jimmy Simpson says, being gay is not a crime or a choice. It's the way some people are. There's a lot more to worry about these days than someone else's sexuality. Perry Banks says, what are you actually fighting for? You already have your rights, and gay pride is being forced on us every other week now. Most of us are not even interested. Just get on with your life. What do you say to that?
I think that's a standard. You know, I could copy and paste that and put it on, you know, any article across the internet. That
you see it a lot, don't you?
You see it a lot, and I think one of the things I would say in response to that is when I can see that hate crime is not actually a thing, and is at the moment it's of course rising, and there's no, you know, and actually one of the things that's most shocking about that is although we can see that it's rising through the official statistics, there's lots of suggestion that actually there's even more going unreported. I know even from my own experience, this year alone, I've experienced a whole load of homophobic attacks in the street, and that wasn't
verbal
attacks. You know, luckily
in
not
London,
physically in London,
in the 21st century.
One of them actually in Soho, you know, which is the heart of the LGBT community in so many ways. And for me, in those moments, it wasn't like I was kissing someone or expressing any, you know, for them I was maybe too feminine. I don't know, you know, they had an issue with that. And for me, as long as people can walk down the street not being able to enjoy their night out or their route to work, as long as that's happening, as long as there's transphobia and people being misgendered on purpose, etc., all of those things are still happening, and as long as that's happening, it has to be challenged and it has to be brought out in the forefront and talked about.
I just think it was, yeah, I mean, what are you still fighting for? I mean, my drag sister the other day just got beat up after a performance, and that is not uncommon. The threat of... And I find that really bizarre because it's just sort of... The legislative right to marry is really not what improves our daily life on a day. You know, I didn't even actually believe in marriage, but that's me personally. But, like, the fact that I might be able to doesn't appease the daily homophobia you get.
Amrou, you mentioned marriage. Now, anyone who's been to Pride will have their own personal memories. But for one couple 2 years ago, their special moment was shared by literally millions online.
Police officer.
That was a proposal from a police officer. It provoked a huge reaction online, not all of it positive. The couple received quite a lot of abuse, comments like, "You should be hanged, disgusting, don't blame ISIS if they strike you." Doesn't this show that Pride's work isn't done, Amrou?
I mean, you answered your own question, but like, definitely. I mean, I just can't even understand why that's provocative. I mean, there's nothing provocative about that. In fact, I find that so normative, that image of just two men just kissing on the street. What if they'd been trans? Like, I just get worried, and they're cis white guys there, they're cisgender and white. Yeah. If they had been people of color or trans bodies, it would have been a different story. That's just about palatable for most of the world because they're masculine, they have good jobs, and they're white. If it had been anyone like me or a person of color, I mean, that would have been a very different story. So
Rhammel, what's Pride's view of that event? I mean, it gets a lot of good publicity.
I mean, for us, you know, any opportunity to kind of, you know, to express love and celebrate for us is a positive. And, you know, I mean, I was very concerned when I heard about the response that the officer and, you know, their partner got. And I think, you know, I think there has to be a conversation actually about online abuse when it comes to the LGBT community because, you know, if you look down absolutely any story on Facebook, whether it's, you know, it doesn't matter what publication it is, if you look down, if there's an angle that's about LGBT rights in any way, shape or form, you just see streams and streams of abuse. And these aren't anonymous accounts. Half of these people, you know, you can find out where they work, where they live, and they're actually emboldened enough, you know, to actually sit there and abuse people, individuals, or just be homophobic. And for me, there's a question over, you know, the role of, you know, society to challenge that and say, actually, that's not acceptable. It's not something that we should be seeing, and it's not something that we should allow.
But it's not just about verbal abuse. It's about sections of our community are really suffering in with physical abuse. You know, bi women are more likely than any group in the LGB area to have been raped. Almost 50% of bi women have been raped. They're more likely to be in violent relationships. They're more likely to be in coercive relationships. They're more likely to have terrible mental health. They're more likely to have PTSD. These things are violent, and it's not just about some people who can't stop being mean underneath the fold of the internet. There are real world physical problems that need addressing that no one is.
As I said, there's been a lot of chatter generated by what you're saying online. Let's look at some of the other comments that we've got coming in. Sheena McLean says, "Pride is about celebrating love, not fighting for something. I think it's great. If you have been to Pride, you will know how fab the atmosphere is." You'll agree with that, Rhammel, presumably. Lynn Berman says, "How much more self-obsessed stuff do we need to hear about? Other lives matter too." Again, that reflecting what you say and what you were saying, Libby, about what people do say online. Jason Harris says, "Homophobia is still alive and well, not just in the UK, but the whole world. This is what these marches are about." Now, every year, Pride has a theme. Last year, it was Love Happens Here. This year, it's Pride Matters.
Somewhere over the rainbow, skies are blue, and the dreams that you dare to dream really do come true.
Rhammel, that's one of the short videos that Pride has produced this year. What's the thinking behind it?
So this year we did an extraordinary survey of just over 2,000 people, and we decided that this survey was going to inform absolutely everything that we did. And what we got out of it really was you know, something that reflected exactly where the LGBT community was at this time. But a lot of what we actually found out from the report wasn't necessarily brand new. It wasn't groundbreaking in that sense. It was just reaffirming the position that the LGBT community are in at the moment. And for me, a lot of the statistics, you know, you can reel them all off, but, you know, it's not the point. A lot of the statistics just demonstrate exactly, you know, the kind of dark picture that, you know, and whether it is physical abuse or online abuse, but just the dark picture that, you know, is being painted there is something that is unsettling. You decided it needed to be part of.
You weren't too worried about Somewhere Over the Rainbow being a bit too cliche? Friends of Dorothy?
I think you know, we can talk about the design of the ad, but one of the things that I think is important that we got across in those adverts and we got across to the audiences is that actually people are still living in situations that they shouldn't have to. Trans people are still facing abuse. LGBT people are still hiding amongst their families and their friends. And that for me was the importance of the advert, is actually saying to audiences, you know, things aren't bright, and you still have a stake in ensuring that you know, we move forward and we change the fabric of Britain, because as we've alluded to earlier, we've got the legislation, but there still needs to be a culture change.
Amrou, was that the first time you'd seen it?
Yeah, that's the first time I saw
What
that.
do you think?
I mean, it was very, very short. I could identify with it. But, yeah, I mean, that sense of hiding that was very much in that is something you actually experience probably like 20 times a day when you're growing up queer. And the problem with that is that it really wires your brain neurologically into some really bad patterns of always feeling in the wrong. I can't tell you, when like a traffic light goes red, I worry that I've upset it, and that is genuinely from like growing up queer in a world where you're hiding. I did want to respond to that first comment about Pride just being fun and fad. That to me just reeks of privilege. Like, I'm having loads of fun. Why is it a protest anymore? It's like, just zoom out of your own world and look at the people who aren't. And B, who is the other person who is like, other lives matter? I don't understand why like a straight person shouldn't also want gay equality. It shouldn't only be queer people who want queer rights. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, I'm not trans fully, I'm non-binary, but like, I mean, I'm still fighting for loads of rights that are mine. Specifically, like, I don't understand why it's not just about us, it's about everyone being happy. So that's also whoever.
Absolutely, and I think sometimes people don't realise that actually when you're fighting for LGBT rights, in order to fight for them properly, we're also talking about women's rights, we're also talking about the rights of people of colour, and we're also talking about the experiences that intersect. And in order to be pro-LGBT rights, I think actually if people really stripped it back, they realise that they're reinforcing their own rights and some of the privileges that they already have. And for us, it's actually just all we're saying is actually let's have some other people, let's ensure that other people enjoy those rights and privileges too.
Which is why it was good
Libby,
to...
what did you make of the video? You smiled.
I watched it once and I vowed I wasn't going to watch it again because
we forced you to.
it's right in the feels, you know. It doesn't reflect my experience growing up. I'm much luckier than that, but it reflects the stories that a lot of my friends can tell. And, you know, I don't do LGBT activism because I will benefit from it. My life is all right. I do it because other people will benefit from it. You know, that's the same as all of us. None of us are sitting here for the personal glory. And in fact, I think all of us would say, do you know what, we're just tired.
Well, we've talked about Pride in the past and what it means to the three of you. Let's look ahead. What are you all hoping for this Saturday?
Well, I was very excited to see the debate that happened about certain airlines who had been complicit in deporting LGBT asylum seekers having to have said, I'm no longer doing that, because there was a lot of, you know, uproar from the queer community saying, why are you marching in Pride if you're also complicit in deporting LGBT asylum seekers? So my thing, really, I think I'd like to see more intersectionality in terms of looking at how things that are affecting queer people are actually also affecting Muslims, for instance. I think that is so important at the moment. And so I'd like to see more things like that happen. I was very excited about that.
Libby, groundbreaking for the bi community to have a proper float. What are you hoping for on Saturday?
I'm hoping that the wheels don't fall off. It's the first float in 47 years. I will be glad if we get to the end of the parade. And hopefully someone will be there with a bottle of gin. I'm so terrified.
Oh, you're going to be amazing.
And Rhammel, what are you and the rest of the Pride organisers hoping for?
I think we're hoping that people are there and are able to express their individuality. One of the great things about this year's theme is that opportunity for groups to actually speak out on the issues that they're passionate about, because actually we have a diverse community, and although those issues cross over, actually there are some things that other groups need to push to the forefront. And I hope that, you know, this is an opportunity for those groups to put those issues on a big platform.
Can I ask you, are you worried about a low turnout from the crowds because of the football?
Well, for us, the celebrations and the protests will go on, and I think some people will plan to combine the celebrations, and hopefully they'll celebrate Pride with us, and they'll celebrate the win hopefully as well.
In summary, then, when asking what's the point of Pride, you have different views, but you all accept there is still a need for it.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
absolutely, 100%.
Yeah.
Okay, Amrou, Libby and Rhammel, I'd like to thank you all very much for sharing your thoughts with us here. While things are coming to an end here in the studio, don't forget you can continue to leave comments below on Facebook, and thank you for watching.